across the sea. Um, and feel free to interrupt me or anyone if there's a point you really want to make. We have, of course, rather grand ambitions that we're going to solve all of the problems in 60 minutes. We may not do that, but we hope to inch closer, and we hope to introduce everyone to one another, because we're all working on such similar overlapping issues. And if I should get started now, maybe I will.
Hold on.
Richard, you're still following the run of show loosely, right?
Very loosely,
Okay.
but following the run of show. Not that loosely. No. The run of show, of course, was my hope that if we were to run things totally according to plan, this is what we would do. But we know that you will surprise us with amazing insights that will take us down some unexpected paths that are even more interesting than what was in my head.
And we are live.
And we are live. we are live from Terra Madre 2022. Sort of like the ashes of the industrial world of Parco Dora, we are now animating this space with the food of the future, and this conversation where we're excited to draw the connection between the protein transition, public procurement, and most importantly, the power of edible education at a municipal level. And this is this extraordinary thing that is happening at this juncture. My name is Richard McCarthy. I sit on the board of directors of Slow Food International. I'm excited to be here with Peggy New, who is the advisor to the Grace Communications Foundation. And we have an incredible team that I'll introduce as we maneuver our way through this agenda. I'm thrilled that you have joined us from afar via this sort of science fiction portal where we are here, you are there, but we're together. And of course, what's bringing us together but food, the thing that always brings us together. I am thrilled that you, Kate Mackenzie, who is the food policy director for the city of New York, is here to really kick off this sort of extraordinary journey as a municipality, the largest, in some ways, the most ambitious, provocative municipality in the United States, has been thinking and has been on a journey to think about its role as a city that sits in a region, that has relationships with its region and its food producers, and during the pandemic was pushed and shoved and responded with incredible resilience and creativity. We'd love to sort of see some insights on that as it relates to the Meatless Monday and the Plant-Powered Friday, where in a snap of a finger you see the shift in the diet and the potential for behavior change among those who eat from the power of the public purse and the municipal public purse. And maybe even before I sort of set you up, or maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that means for eaters in New York City. What does it mean for the sourcing of the food? And I'm sure a very simple process with which to change menus in New York City schools and hospitals and public canteens. Kate, tell us about what you've been up to.
Thank you, Richard. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm not going to lie, I wish I had a glass of wine too. But
I'm sorry, I'll hide that.
But let me actually just start, because I'm here actually on behalf of Mayor Eric Adams. And, you know, Mayor Adams is extraordinary on many levels, but I want to share a little bit about why food is so central to this administration. And it's because it's personal for him. Mayor Adams, several years ago, was not feeling well at all. He thought he had an ulcer. He tells this story so much better than I can. But ultimately, it turned out that he had advanced diabetes. He had lost the feeling in his fingers. You know, he having difficulty seeing and was just very, very overweight. His doctor then, put him on a path to, treating this with the classic insulin and medications. And rather than living with diabetes, he went home and took the very medical approach of Googling reversing diabetes. And through that process, he ultimately learned about a plant-based lifestyle and the power of diet in preventing and in some cases treating diabetes. And for him, within 3 weeks of changing his diet to a plant-based diet, he didn't have any problems seeing. Within 3 months, he no longer was diabetic. And he maintains that lifestyle of a plant-based diet to this day. But he doesn't stop at food, at health, right? About food is health. Within the first weeks of his tenure as mayor back in January, he formalized our city's good food purchasing program with an executive order. He reissued food and nutrition standards for all meals and snacks served in city agencies. So for those of you that might wonder, that's not just our schools, which itself is extraordinarily huge with close to 1 million meals a day, but it also is our public hospital system and our homeless shelters and our programs that feed our seniors, to name just a few. He changed those standards, not just limiting the amount of meat that can be served, but also introducing floors for the amount of plant-based proteins that must be served. Importantly, those standards also connected sustainability and environment to food standards, which is what we're trying to push our federal government to do. He funded major investments in food infrastructure and ultimately ensured that my office, the Mayor's Office of Food Policy, is intimately connected to our schools. As you mentioned, he introduced Plant-Powered Fridays. And as you know, I've got 2 young kids who eat those school meals. And it was a journey, but now I really mean to say it, they look forward to those meals. He's worked to improve the cooking capabilities of our school kitchens, which itself is a journey, but acknowledging that. He basically also charged my office and our education department with meaningfully connecting the experiential learning of food and nutrition education to the meals that are served, which, as we know, Alice has also been such a maven in spearheading. He launched the first ever food and climate dashboard that creates a more transparent city to inform New Yorkers about the role of and the impact of our food procurements on the environment. And obviously, since this is also Climate Week, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the leadership the city is taking in the connection of food and climate. New York City was the first US city to sign on to the Cool Food Pledge. We had a lovely event last evening here in the city. Within 1 year, we've reduced the carbon footprint of city food purchases by 37% through limiting meat. Through a partnership in the C40 network and Amex, we're participating in consumption-based emissions inventory of our city that includes food. And Mayor Adams plans to speak to the findings of that modeling at the C40 Summit next month. Notably, we're starting a sister office of urban agriculture to focus clearly on the role of urban growing, from community gardens to school gardens and rooftop farms, and the social and economic opportunities for this are extraordinary. So in summary, it's a great time to be in food policy in New York City, and we're really eager to learn from our global partners and our just other inspirations across the movement.
Okay. I'd love to jump in. One of Grace's signature initiatives is Meatless Monday, and I actually was at the press conference several years ago when Mayor de Blasio with Eric Adams launched it. And one of the things that I know has been a challenge over the years is just dairy. and, Meatless Monday being cheese pizza or grilled
Mhm.
cheese sandwiches. And I'm just curious what your journey with that has been, because I know so many parents where macaroni and cheese is what they feed their kids,
Yeah.
because that's what they're eating. So is that kind of needed in order to get meatlessness being successful or accepted by kids? And how have you been able to really get them, interested in plant-powered food
Yeah.
rather than just dairy?
I so appreciate you raising that, because itself is incredibly complicated and has deep history within our federal government too. And also is an example of how we can only go so far in our carbon within our school system, that, as some people may know, we are required to offer milk with all meals. So this isn't about, shaming dairy or not, but what we would like to see is also an evolution of our federal nutrition programs that supports the fact that, in this, well, across the country, the world, frankly, but especially in this city, many people can't digest dairy. We need other options to be able to be included for, the plant-based milks to be able to be considered as a reimbursable component of our meals. But we just need to see some of these systems that were created in, the 40s, frankly, be able to evolve for how our diets have evolved also to be more culturally responsive and frankly appropriate. But I do think, another thing I just want to offer is that we had the extraordinary fortune kicking off this week with Climate Week to bring in the Food for Climate League into City Hall to have a training for all of our agency comms professionals as well as program professionals about how to talk about food and climate. And notably, I thought this was interesting, and again, about the journey of meatless, that really talking why I think the specific naming of plant powered is it's all inclusive. It's not about something that's not on the plate, which inevitably will, get people who eat those things to feel, this isn't for me or something like that. We're really trying to lean into not ostracizing and feeling like people are leaving something out, but we're promoting the things that are very good. And so just comparing and contrasting the names of plant powered as opposed to meatless is an example of that.
Yeah, the the language and the mobilizing, I can only imagine, is a challenge in very entrenched departments and staff who are used to being things operating in a certain way, whether it's the procurement procedures and whether there's a supply for the products that you want to shift towards. Um, if I can bring in Alice to this, because I can only imagine, Alice, you're chomping at the bit when you heard Kate describe this is more than just the logistics of how do you move vast amounts of food one way or the other. I heard a multifaceted approach which actually gets to the experience of the children, the end users, and how do they become protagonists in this process. You've seen the school garden as that point of entry, but you want to go far, so much more beyond that. And you've described something that almost sounds familiar if you know what community supported agriculture is, but you don't know what school supported agriculture is. And as Kate described, many of those decisions are made at the municipal level. What do you mean by school supported agriculture?
Well, it's so great to hear what you were saying, Kate, because you've just taken that first step, which is having the mayor of the city really engaged and understanding that health begins in the soil, in the ground. And I think that's something that people do not understand. And here we had Rachel Carson talking 60 years ago, and it's her 60th anniversary since Silent Spring, and yet we have not taken action around that. And it is possible, though, because the school system is for all children, and it's a public institution. And we have the power, or you have the power, to make dramatic change. And I have discovered after 26 years now of the Edible Schoolyard Project that has gone around the world, and there are 6,700 schools that are teaching in the garden classroom or in the kitchen classroom or both. And it's never to teach gardening or cooking per se, it's to teach the academic subjects in the context of those spaces. And we had a great model. I didn't know, but King School in Berkeley, Martin Luther King School, has 1,000 kids, and they speak 22 different languages at home. And these are teenagers, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And so I can tell you that when they're engaged in any way in the process of cooking the food or serving the food, they are changed by that. And if the food is tasty and they can add a little hot pepper if they want to, and all of that, they really embrace just about everything we make in the classroom. And it's very diverse from, pita bread and hummus, the easy things, kale salads and all of that. But we never talk about the fact that there's less cheese and meat is used as a condiment. And the one thing I've been doing this year is trying to make a cookbook showing all the lunches that we've done that fit into the USDA reimbursement. I bought all organic food retail, and it all fits into that little minuscule reimbursement. But I wanted to think of a way that we could really support the farmers who are taking, ranchers who are taking care of all of our food producers. And we've been doing this at Chez Panisse for not 51 years, but probably 45, where we went straight to the farm and we said, we'll pay you the real cost of food. You don't have to sell wholesale to us. We'll pay you. So we started this with our farmer, Bob Kennard, and we took all the scraps because he wanted everything. And he was a regenerative farmer before that word ever came into our vocabulary. And he took all of that and put it in the garden. And that's when we started to get tasty food at Chez Panisse. Because at that time, I wasn't thinking about, well, maybe I was because I lived in Berkeley in the 60s and we diet for a small planet. But I wanted to eat like the French, and I wanted taste. And the way to get taste is by eating in season strictly and locally. Now, a big point I would like to make, and it's something that I've talked a lot about in my most recent book, We Are What We Eat, is that all the way until about 70 years ago, we ate like that everywhere on the planet. Maybe we imported coffee, tea, and spices. But even at Christmas, living in New Jersey, I maybe got an orange from Florida, or my father got some dates from California, but we only ate food that was grown nearby. And then all of the frozen processed food came in the 50s. And not only changed our diet entirely, but it taught us a whole set of values that come with fast food, that more is better, that time is money, that I want everything fast, cheap, and easy.
Right.
Cooking is drudgery, farming is drudgery. I want what I want whenever I want, and it's okay to waste. There's always more. And so these values have been deeply digested by practically all Americans. And we spread it around the world. Thank God for Carla Petrini protesting Rome. And that is something that we have to counteract because it is everywhere. And so I'm figuring that if we begin in kindergarten, really in schools, and use that procurement budget to support the local who are taking care of the land and their farm workers, that we can get food without the middleman to come right into our schools. We have to decentralize the whole process, and different schools would have different farms that they were connected with. But that way, the values of the farmers come right through the cafeteria door. And last, I wanted to say that I've been trying to work with the University of California to do this, and they are very, very serious. They already have organic procurement as part of their carbon neutrality for
Right.
2025. And they're really working to do this at every campus. Some are a lot further on than others. But just saying, like in New York City, just saying that we would like to do this is what we did at Chez Panisse, and you cannot imagine who will come to you in terms of farmers, dairies, all of the people, bread makers, tortilla makers. It's going
So Alice,
wants
if
to
I-
see at the real cost.
So, Alice, what you're
Yeah.
describing is that your wild ideas have become practical solutions. And they may have seemed wild then, and I can't see you, Kate, you may be sort of thinking, oh my goodness, farmers selling to different schools directly inside the New York City municipal procurement system may be a wild idea at this stage. But this is the question of scale
Yep.
and procurement. And I also heard, in this way, I love Andrea Magarini from the Milan Food Policy Pact to begin to chime in, not only from a European perspective, from Milan, and from work that grew out of the Milan Expo, but also with this incredible network of municipalities all over the world, is that we are all trying to figure out how to integrate the supply issue and the demand issue. And I know that Maggie, you're still there, and thank you for hanging in so late in the night for you, is about the whole issue of the demand and those who are vulnerable and who have the right and the dignity to have quality food that isn't just the industrial overs that are fed everyone. There are a lot of logistic issues in terms of how to get the product into the canteens, the cafeterias, but it's also the manner in which they get brought in. And I think, Alice, this is what you've always really promoted, the dignity and love of eating around a table should not be like working in a factory. And in particular, the academic subject that should be eating. We get to learn so much around the table because we learn how to talk as children to adults and adults to adults, but in particular in schools. And in particular that the food itself is part of the educational program, which is this idea of school-supported agriculture. And I don't know if you heard, Peggy, but Alice was describing many plant-based foods.
Mhm.
What an opportunity to eat falafel in your children's school menu, and you learn what falafel is and where it comes from, and it's a traditional food. It's not some industrial new plant-based food. It's traditional food. It speaks to our biodiversity and cultural diversity. But these are complicated issues. We're wrestling with them in the United States. Andrea, what are you seeing here in Europe? Are the same wrestling going on? Is it a challenge? Can you integrate the public-facing experience of the children along with the logistics of what Kate was describing with the good food purchasing process? Are you ahead of us? Can you teach us something?
Yeah, of course. Thank you also for having me. So within the broader family of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, now we are in more than 240 cities all around the world. But since 2015, we are committing, our mayors are committing our municipalities to work in this approach. And school canteens, school meals are one of the main starting points that we see all around the world. So what Kate mentioned is already replicated in a lot of other cities. In Milan, we have 85,000 per day that we serve the municipality for our school canteens. And we committed since the launch of our local food policies as well when we launched the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact to guide, to lead the transformation of our food system toward more plant-based food. And so year by year, each 6 months, more or less, we change the menu. We shift the menu from seasonal menu from winter to summer. And at the time was the perfect time frame to introduce a new recipes, to change one raw materials. And so in 5 years, we avoided the red meat and we introduced legumes.
Legumes. So
legumes.
Italian legumes.
Local.
Magiola, local.
Yeah, lenticchie as well.
Perfetto.
Yeah, and was a very good way to shift from animal protein to animal-based protein to plant-based. And
Do you hear that, Alice? Local
Yes, I have
beans.
beans and there's
Okay.
Were you able to get the Ministry of Agriculture involved? I mean, I think that's one thing we're interested in with cities. There are different departments and stakeholders or tourism that might want to find out about your special beans.
So the main effort is try as mayor to try to engage the different soul of the different departments, as we have done, and then scaling up this governance effort towards a food policy department as now we have established. And so in my department, we have school canteens, agriculture together. So the head of the different units are working together, and also with the municipal agency for school canteens. So it's a good effort to try to organize local supply chains and so on. And it's an effort not just from Milan, because we entered in 2018 maybe in the Cool Food Pledge initiative, and Ghent entered, Copenhagen entered, Toronto entered, New York, as mentioned by Kate, entered. And so we are also monitoring our climate impact based on our school canteen system. And we reduced about 20% of our greenhouse gas emission in 5 years. That was a very great achievement. But also the city of Seoul, for instance, in South Korea, tried to do the same. They organized this name of eco, plant-based, friendly, something else menu.
In Seoul.
In Seoul, by connecting rice production of short supply chains, of vegetable productions, and so on. In Copenhagen, they try to increase the biodiversity of potatoes in the tender. There is a very good chief procurement officer that try to have more premium criteria for the supplier that are able to do not just one shape of potato, but if you are able to do different color, different shape, different flavor, and so on, so the biodiversity, you have more criteria.
Interest and excite. Oh, and the criteria,
And the
so
criteria.
it does better.
Yeah. And also the
Ranks higher.
Yeah.
And it's more fun, right?
It's more fun. It's very
Yeah,
fun because
very fun.
you cannot know what the color of your potato in that specific day you have, because it's a very variety and so on. Also on the apple the same, and so it's a very good approach. And within the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, we are trying to share these experiences each other, to apply to European funds, to European projects, to have the possibility to travel each other and to know each other in this way. So in the next week, we will go in Copenhagen with our Chief Procurement Officer to meet the Copenhagen Chief Procurement Officer and to know in a peering way the way in which we are going this kind of tender. So it's a new way to try to share our practices.
Kate, are you still there?
I have this picture in my mind, yes, of actually having some of the individuals that make our city contracts actually touching and feeling and tasting food rather than looking at the papers on their desk.
Because it's just numbers. It's just numbers.
It's like, does it respectfully, because these are extraordinarily hard working public servants, but it's what's the lowest bid? Is it a responsible bidder? You know, and how do we find creativity within these very unappealing structures of public procurements?
I agree totally, because I began that edible schoolyard project. The principal was engaged, but no one else in the whole school system was. So I invited them to come to lunch at Chez Panisse, and it worked like a charm. And I constantly brought the math class to have their meetings at the restaurant for dinner. They had never been invited out to gather like that. And that, what I've been doing always, is that I bring a peach or whatever's in season to the meeting, and I put it right on the table. If you don't have a restaurant, you can take them to. But it's amazing when you have something that really wakes them up, like a peach now. And I can't say more about creating the environment that you want to offer to children.
So some of these ideas you can find on the Milan Food Policy Pact website of things to share. I think we need more cross-pollination of ideas, especially internationally. And also, I think, between large cities and smaller ones. In some ways, it's almost easier in the smaller ones, but they're also outside of the loop of the discourse. I also want to bring in the other side of the equation, which are the eaters. They're not just end consumers who get what we get. They're protagonists. I know, Alice, at the Edible Schoolyard, you are growing the next generation of eaters who run towards the good food because they know good food. They grow it, they actually know how to manipulate it, how to enjoy the flavor. But that is an issue of becoming a protagonist, a young person becoming a protagonist. And with that, Carlotta Salerno, you are an assessor, which I think in the US, we would probably say a commissioner maybe for the city of Torino.
Deputy mayor.
Deputy mayor. Well, okay. we have, you hear that, Kate? I'd love to hear about the issue of what does that mean? We are in Torino. What are the issues that you hear that really resonate, or what is the big challenge, especially for the voices of youth, who are, of course, the eaters we are concerned with, but they must have a say-so in this as well. This is the other piece of biodiversity, linguistic diversity.
I didn't plan this, Richard, but just before this meeting,
I'm speaking Italian and she translates for me.
I had a meeting with the Catalonians on this topic. So it's just ironic how the days are set up. So I'm experiencing what you're saying.
La situazione, allora, Torino parte da una situazione particolare perché colui che è diciamo, il consumatore finale, cioè il bambino e i ragazzi, in realtà per moltissimi anni non sono stati neanche vagamente considerati.
So in Turin, we have a very specific situation where, for many years, the final eaters, that in this case are the youth or the young, the kids, were not considered at all in the shaping of the policies.
Si diceva che veniva considerato il parere delle bambine e dei bambini, magari studiando alimenti che potessero piacere loro, ma in realtà era paradossale perché si valutava solo in base a ciò che rimaneva nel piatto, cioè solo in base allo spreco.
There was actually a way to evaluate whether the food was appreciated by the kids, but it was a particular factor because it was based on what was left on the plate. So kind of measuring that by measuring what is left by the leftovers.
The leftovers,
So yeah.
E purtroppo, lo dico anche con dispiacere, partendo anche dall'esperienza di Andrea Magarini, prima si pensava solo alla questione dell'appalto pubblico. Il problema era sempre solo l'appalto e le caratteristiche dell'appalto.
Yeah, because this is sad to say, and also linking to what Andrea Magarini was saying. Before, the thought, how to shape the policy, were strictly related to the call for tender, so only regarding that side of the issue, so not really considering the entire picture, but only that specific part.
E quindi il cibo a scuola e la mensa e la ristorazione erano solo un problema burocratico,
So
amministrativo.
then at the end, what happens that canteens and how to run canteens, it's become only a bureaucratic issue.
E questo ha creato una separazione sia con i ragazzi che con le famiglie, uno scontro anche con l'amministrazione, molta agitazione da questo punto di vista, perché mancava il legame che invece il cibo crea, mancava la condivisione del cibo.
And so necessarily running things like this brought to create a whole distance between the eaters, the families, the administration, and there was a lot of tension on this topic because of these two sides not really talking to each other, and because it also was missing this link that good food also bring to these two components.
E noi adesso stiamo cercando di cambiare completamente direzione, si parte sempre da un appalto, perché si parte sempre da un appalto, ma il lavoro che stiamo impostando adesso parte dal valore positivo del cibo e della condivisione, e quindi dall'ascolto di tutti i soggetti, cioè ci mettiamo insieme con vari strumenti diversi, alcuni divertenti, alcuni più seri come dei tavoli, e cerchiamo di studiare il modo di mangiare a scuola in modo condiviso.
Okay, so now we try to run things differently, the new municipality. Always, of course, need to start with a call for tender, but also trying to really put everyone, every stakeholder on the table discussion, and doing different things, more political and structuring the policies together, so with a participatory approach, but also maybe considering the final eater, so with more interacting activities.
La prima cosa che abbiamo detto è stata che non ci interessava spendere di meno, quindi non ci sarà nessuna azienda premiata perché ci fa risparmiare. Questa è la prima cosa che abbiamo detto. In italiano non c'è ribasso di gara nell'appalto.
The very first thing that they decided as municipality was we are not interested in spending less. So we are not interested in that part. So that's the really first thought from where it comes, then every other actions.
E poi studieremo abbiamo dei menù di base, come penso tutti quanti, impostati grazie insomma, ai medici, alle tabelle nutrizionali, ma in realtà studieremo le cotture, gli alimenti, ciò che arriva insieme a tutti i gruppi di ragazzi, anche secondo le fasce d'età, ascoltando i bambini, ascoltando i bimbi delle elementari, ascoltando i ragazzi un po' più grandi, mixando anche con i genitori. Ma l'ultima cosa per noi altrettanto importante è l'educazione alimentare, perché i bambini arrivano a scuola con una pessima educazione alimentare, con pessime abitudini alimentari.
Yeah. The first thing, not spend less money, and the second thing is to study the menu and to really study with all these different stakeholders. So of course, also like including the nutritional component, the exchanging with the nutritionist, pediatrician, and all that side. But also to really study the menu, like to evaluate and monitoring the menus on the different age range, so like from very from the elementary school to high schools, involving also parents, because another point of the discussion is the food education of the kids, because what it has been highlighted is the very low food education of the kids that are today in our schools.
Chiudo dicendo che tutti gli sforzi, come fate anche voi, nella direzione di una riduzione della carne, della transizione proteica, dell'avvicinarsi a cibi differenti e a capire il valore anche appunto dell'inserimento di cibi vicini e della varietà alimentare, per essere vissuti bene necessitano del fatto di farli insieme, perché altrimenti il cibo perde l'elemento più importante, che è l'elemento della bellezza. Quindi siamo partiti da capo, abbiamo detto cerchiamo di lavorare per far sì che il momento della mensa per i bambini sia di nuovo bello e divertente.
So an effort, like also regarding the efforts we were talking about, like reducing meat and develop and implement protein transition, we're also considering local food, diverse food. It's really important to do in this participatory approach, because it's really important. There is a need to like make this, like involve these people, do it together to make these people accept change. And so this really help us also in starting something also fun and enjoyable for the kids.
Can I ask, where would you have gleaned or developed a participatory approach? Because this would not be typical for municipal government.
Come sviluppate l'elemento partecipativo?
Abbiamo diversi, li creeremo adesso man mano, ma abbiamo diversi percorsi. Allora, degli incontri di educazione alimentare in tutte le scuole, preparando dei documenti, invitando sia i bambini che i genitori a fare degli incontri di discussione. Poi dei questionari, anche quelli semplici, per verificare l'apprezzamento dei cibi e di quello che viene fatto. La chiacchierata soprattutto con i bambini, per capire cosa vorrebbero e magari partire da un cibo che non è adatto, diciamo, magari vorrebbero una cosa, vorrebbero l'hamburger, e cercare di capire come trasformare questo desiderio. E poi coinvolgere i ragazzi un po' più grandi, quelli che studiano da noi all'alberghiero, quelli che studiano all'alberghiero, per fare dei menù per i più piccoli.
Yeah, so these are like they are putting in place different strategies and different activities. First, like training moments with the kids and with parents, explaining regarding food education. Another point is to introduce questionnaires, like basic questionnaires asking like kids the appreciation of the meal, and also two other things. First, like to really listen to have chats and listen to what kids would like. So to ask them what you would like to eat, and maybe they say I want to eat hamburger. Okay, so let's try to start from this point, what you would like, and try to from there like
To move to new places.
to yes, to new places.
Okay.
And last, also they are going to implement an activity with culinary schools, like high schools, and make them create menus for the younger generation. So
okay.
like maybe like having maybe a little bit more connection with the generation.
Beer menu.
Beer
Yes.
menu, beer menu, exactly.
If I can just quickly cite that, thank you, Carolina,
Thank you very
for
much.
translating.
Thank you very much.
Carolina Modena is more than just a translator, but really the force behind the Let It Bean campaign with the mayors throughout Italy. And so there are many different pressure points in order to rise to the top the visibility of some of the plant-forward assets that we have, because very often they're overlooked. And in particular, Carlotta, from your reference to the children who are often not thought of for the decisions that we made, I also want to make sure that I bring Maggie, you into it. I hope you're still awake. I know it's very late. But I'd love, because you work with populations that are completely falling through the cracks and are not thought of as priorities, and very often those who you support with your organization Support and Feed, which I'd love for you to share with us as well, are very often literally given what's left over with no thought as to their dignity and no thought as to that they should be part of the equation with plant-based meals for emergency circumstances, for the vulnerable. We'd love to hear how these very strategic institutional strategies are part of the ecosystem, but you're hitting a piece of the ecosystem that is so difficult to reach.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've just listened to everything, everything resonates so much for me. I mean, we actually support and feed. We do feed meals at PS20 in New York City. And,
Yay!
yeah, we're the school system, I think, is the ultimate goal, really, right? Because that's where you can reach the most people and, the public school system. So at PS20, we're feeding restaurant quality meals and taking into account the advice you just gave. What do you want to eat? What do you like? What do you want to learn about? I've done Zooms with the kids, talking to them about what food they like. And in a school in Chicago where we feed meals once a week to high school students, we've brought in chefs. We've had kids get jobs in the restaurants of the plant-based restaurants who've brought the meals and had information sessions, not only about the health of the food, but the environmental aspects of the food. And then we've taken the time to ask the kids, what do you want to have? What do you think you wouldn't be able to eat if we brought you plant-based meals? We've heard everything from, banana pudding and of course, mac and cheese, comfort foods. But what really shocked me, and this comes to you, Alice, is that what they really wanted was a mango or a dragon fruit or some produce that they really wanted to try fruit that they had never had. And I think this is where we meet this overlap, right? So with Support and Feed, we believe that our first entry point is the meal. If the meal is delicious, restaurant quality, chef prepared, the dignity you or I would want if we went and got a meal, that's the entry point. And then you learn, oh, that was a fully plant-based meal. Oh, wow, that's an eye-opener right there. If you neglect the quality of the meal, you're sinking your ship immediately, right?
Yeah.
Has to be delicious as well as nourishing. And so that's where we open the door first with the delicious meal. And then the education, the information can come along with it. We have a hydroponic farm, and that we're renting at one of the boys and girls clubs in Metro Los Angeles. We have the kids in the hydroponic farm growing the produce, learning about it. They just were harvesting yesterday, going out to the families with a recipe. We're providing a meal also from a chef, that has that ingredient in it, because many people don't know how to use some of the ingredients that they might be growing. So it's a really it all depends on each other, and it's all the things everyone has just said. But we must not neglect the food insecure population of our country and our world, which is tremendous, and where people may not only do they not have access to nourishing food for proximity or financial reasons, but they have no taste for it because they have not had access. So you can't neglect that part and be insensitive to the fact that if you're making these transitions, you have to take the time and invest the money, as you said, not always be focused on paying less. We pay our restaurants a fair wage. We don't get a discounted rate, because we're also supporting a farmer and a truck driver and everyone along the way. So the system has to all work in conjunction. I know, Kate, you're dealing with budgets and the terrible constraints that come in, but ultimately food, we undervalue our food. And with the government subsidizing the meat and dairy industry, we realize that the industry that we really need to have subsidized, we can't be shortchanging them. So I sort of spewed out a lot there, but everyone said so many great things there. So I think it all just plays right into the same mission.
I really love what you're saying about the career path potentially of a high school student going into, it could be food service, it could be farming, and there's such a labor shortage in a way that provides a whole other benefit to get to know the food industry and cooking and cuisine. So I think that could be a very powerful idea, is to look at involvement and engagement with all of this as a career path, which is another incentive.
Right. The teachable moment.
A big part of our goal is to, progress to the point of, we work with other organizations that are in the produce rescue mission, and we really have the big dream of, utilizing that produce in our local communities with chefs, and then teaching people how to cook it as well and get into that food system. So I happen to be in Melbourne right now, and Australia has a wonderful program called Oz Harvest, where they're doing some amazing things. And, it's not so much that food rescue is bad. Food rescue is wonderful. But if we are just taking leftovers, as you say, and just thrusting them, that's different than using that immense amount of waste we have in our farming system, especially, and putting that to use, making the beautiful meals that will nourish people and, solve so many environmental issues at the same time.
Well, I'd love to hear, Kate, I know your history, you have come out of a food rescue background and had to interact with the city. Now you're in the city. What is that interface like? Are things getting easier? Are there any holy grails to unlock the door?
It's certainly not getting easier, but I think it's getting more understood, and particularly participating in the COVID journey and the response, in the city, we basically said, raise your hand, and if you cannot get food or afford your food delivered to you and have no one to get food for you, we will deliver you. We'll get you something, right? And so that program persisted for 18 months, if not more, and was directly a result of the order to stay at home that was felt worldwide, right? But as we looked at then the participation of that program, and then we got to really examine as Maggie said, the emergency food system, when we think about food insecurity, people can't just pivot to like, oh, well, the, soup kitchens and food pantries are there for them. We know in this city that there's roughly 50% of food insecure New Yorkers that don't go to kitchens and pantries. They're still just like struggling, making ends meet, getting really creative and innovative with what they're putting on their tables, but having that feeling of like, geez, I don't know what's going to come next. That's not okay. But connecting that to the school food piece, one of the reasons, and this is incredibly sobering, but more than 75% of kids in our city struggle to put meals on their tables in every day. They are either qualify for what is known as free or reduced price meals, but let's just say they're income compromised, right? So for many kids, those 2 meals that they get in the schools could be the only meals they get a day. And so we really want to make sure that they are, of course, solid, but not just solid, but delicious, right? And an extraordinary experience for them. And so, I'm hearing all of this. I'm also quite proud of the fact that in New York City, we don't put anything on the menu that's not approved by kids. And I mean that. Like, it has 75% of students who taste the food, it has to get an approval of at least 75% of kids. And that's done across all different boroughs, different ages, because we have such a culturally diverse system. And so that's because we don't want to put food on the plates that kids aren't going to eat. No one wants that.
And how's that done? How's that done, Kate?
I've got it's literally it's very structured in the sense of kids come into a cafeteria and it's like there's this, you're going to taste this, and here's your very similar to what you described of whether it's a smiley face or a frowny face, but like get a sense of, do you like this? But also not just yes or no, what could be better? Right. What is it too salty? What does it need more flavor, and what kinds of flavors? So with every different product that gets either considered to be introduced, and even again in the procurement process, this is some of the feedback that then will go back into the specs of what it could be. But increasingly, and starting this year as we embark on all new, not all new, but really evolved recipe development, getting in from the get-go to help refine the recipes, right? So those are really important components, I believe, to making sure that food is delicious and that there's a familiarity with it.
Mm-hmm. And on that familiarity, I know that New York City is an extraordinarily diverse city. Torino is an extraordinarily diverse city, and more so, is there a demand that is being heard for new residents of Torino, immigrants, refugees, on the school lunch?
Sì, della
Sì,
richiesta,
yeah.
ci sono state richieste,
Sì.
visto
Allora,
all'Università di Cultura.
Su questo tema, per fortuna, la città è attenta questo da tanti anni, bisogna dire. Almeno dal 2010 ci sono tutti i menu specifici per qualunque tipo di orientamento religioso.
I think they'll kick us off.
Oh, sì.
Yeah.
Per qualunque tipo di orientamento religioso, ma anche per sensibilità personali.
Okay, so actually on this point, we're very lucky here because it's been like since 2010 nearly that there are diverse menus according to cultural
Religion, culture,
religion, but also like needs and like necessities on the food
Health needs.
health need and
Però
also
quello che stiamo cercando di fare non è ragionare solo di rispettare le inclinazioni religiose, quindi nei menù, ma di integrare gli elementi interculturali nei menù di tutti.
Yeah, so it's not really interesting not only to just foresee and provide one dish that is okay for a specific culture or a religious belief, but to integrate that dish in the everyday meals of all the people. So like to really like provide that type of food for everyone and not just because someone is and like to really also get a sense of the diversity.
So this is really normalizing diversity,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which is, of course, an issue that we are all grappling with to celebrate it.
But in Italy it's complicated.
It's complicated.
Tradition. Pasta.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to find out from the keepers of this science fiction portal that we are in. Are we expiring in a moment?
No, yeah, keep on going a little bit, but we're close to the
We're
end.
close to. Well, I am so encouraged by something that my colleague Peggy described, was the rising up of the voices of the consumers, the eaters, the children, the vulnerable families and eaters that support and feed, are able to hear and attend to. But also importantly, that these decisions and the innovation is being incubated at a municipal level. And that, what I think I hear is the kind of leadership that is emanating out of the city, not as an island, but the city as an integral part of territories and regions. And I'm curious, Kate, I know we're always approaching the next 5-year agricultural plan, the Farm Bill in the USA, or CAP in Europe, where these decisions are made on high. Do you feel, Andrea, that the voices of the city are being heard and it's being recognized that maybe some of the best agricultural policies come out of cities?
Yeah, it's a very big question because also we have this farm to fork policy strategy in the European Union.
Right.
But since many years, all the European cities are working within the boundaries of the space in which we can be heard in order to push the attention on short supply chains. We have, since the last Common Agricultural Policy, a specific measure to organize a city region food system, and a lot of European cities are receiving funds to invest in very short supply chains, so our legumes coming from the nearby peri-urban agriculture, and topic like this. The new frontline is the topic of trying to have this new European food law, in which all of us are working to try to have the definition of sustainable food system, in which we can put that part in our tender in order to be more easy to connect with local farmers and also to put our kids in the farm to see what they are doing. But yeah, we are in a good process, I think. So better than 7 years ago.
So we are moving.
Yeah.
And is that perceived as having an economic benefit? Because I think going back to the lowest bidder in a school system, I mean, if you can demonstrate that there's an economic benefit to sourcing locally, that would be a good rationale, I would think.
Yeah, otherwise you are connecting bananas from South America, you are connecting rice for Southeast Asia, but we have rice production in the nearby boundaries of Milan, and we connect already since many years our farmers to the procurement of rice in Milan. The kids go in the farm with the teacher to see the field, also by moving towards the organic production on that side. What is a great achievement that again 7 years ago what doesn't happen.
Right.
And after 7 years there are a lot of cities that are part of this movement.
Kate, do you hear that you're heard, or are you not sure?
I use this example to describe Mayor Adams as he uses the lens of food to be able to talk about health policies, social policies, environmental policies, economic policies as they relate to getting our businesses back and paying our food sector well. I don't see that in our federal government. Food is still a one issue. I'm either going to talk about farms at the sacrifice of anything else, or I'm going to talk about health. Well, few people talk about food and health, but I think that the whole of government approach to food is something that we are trying to model using next Tuesday's White House conference as, to continue to drive that message.
And tell us, what is this conference?
The Wednesday is the first conference in 53 years that brings together the conversation about hunger, health, and nutrition. And
So this will be one to watch to see if we are.
I hope.
White House.
Yes,
I
at the
hope.
White House. Yeah.
I hope there has been a lot of rolling up to this moment, because the last event, many decades ago, while there were many recommendations that were made, some of the key items that stuck were things like our Women, Infants, and Children's program, and some very significant efforts that we still utilize. But as a nod to my comment about milk earlier, and we need to evolve some of them, and making sure that I think this is the moment again, if we can look at food from again as a way to address the commonalities of these somewhat diverse sectors of social supports to farm supports to environment and economy, then we'll be able to get somewhere. And so if we can find more areas of consensus and less sparring, maybe we'll get somewhere.
Alice, doesn't that sound like music to your ears?
Well, I wanted to cook lunch for that event. And up on it. I wanted to make a placemat. I wanted to do that thing, but they made a different decision. But reading the agenda, it didn't sound like they understood that health begins in the ground, that really needs to be clarified. And to know that if the schools purchase local food, supported those people who take care of the land for the future, that it's like, they have to face the fact that these are big corporations that they have to confront and say no to.
And it's hard to say no.
Michelle Obama had that big problem when she thought that they would help and they didn't. And so it's about time. I'm so glad you're going. I'm not going. But that is the big issue. And I think that the idea of school-supported agriculture, that we could be the economic engine for every state if we decided to buy food at the real price. I know people would just find meaningful work. And I just wanted to say that when kids grow it and cook it, they all eat it, and it doesn't matter what it is. And so to engage them somehow around taste and what their opinions are would be to bring them to a garden, engage them in a different way, engage them in a blind tasting, rather than an opinion of something that's coming from the top.
Maybe
I just wanted to add that, everything everyone on this meeting is saying is so important and powerful, but there's an urgency. There's a,
Yes.
I know we all feel it, this deep urgency, that we've known so many things for decades, but we are literally at a crisis. We are at an existential, enormous crisis. And if this conference, Kate, you'll be there, I mean, the urgency with which this all has to be addressed, because the health aspect is so important, but we know that the climate aspect right now is defining the future of the entire earth. So, just adding that the undercurrent of this entire conversation to me always is, we gotta hurry up.
Exactly.
Well, and Maggie, thank you for landing this conversation, because of course we are at Slow Foods, iconic Terra Madre, and though we are slow, we are also incredibly urgent. We need regeneration here and now is the time to transform the way we eat, because we transform the way we eat, we perhaps provide an inkling of a possibility that we will still be here generations from now. And we thank you for joining us. We wish you were both here with us here in Torino. We will
Us
toast
too.
all three of you. We wish you were all here with us. But thank you for giving us so much to think about as we open up probably another bottle of wine, and then we will get urgent.
Cheers.
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 Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Dying to talk to you again, Maggie. We lost our contact. I don't want
Oh,
to say goodbye.
Alice, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to go live at the
Cheers.
Ford Foundation.
Yeah,
We
In
love
the-
you, Alice. We miss you.
I miss
Yeah.
you.
we wish you were here.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
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 Thank
And
you.
congrats on your award. That is amazing.
Thank you
Very cool.
so much.
Nice job. Very
Thank
good
you.
job.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
tough.
Grazie mille.
Grazie a voi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
It was like 10 seconds outside.
I know. You don't
Infatti
want
tu
to
non
be.
stai morendo, poverina.
Io ce l'ho i piedi.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well.